Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. It's a real pleasure to have you all here. Firstly, I just want to welcome Rong. I believe this is your first time to Melbourne. Is that right?
Yes, this is first time.
Well, awesome. Thank you so much for coming. I know it's a long flight from China and Seattle, where you're based, so we greatly appreciate having you here. Now, for everybody, I know for a lot of you, some of you are ICT students, and you're not necessarily familiar with the background that Rong has. So he's a very humble man. He wouldn't go out of his way to tell you all the accomplishments that he's had. So I'm just going to run through very quickly some of the things he's done in his career, just so that you can have some context of his experience. So, Rong, you grew up in Beijing, China. You won a scholarship working at a company that would first become, or would now become, Lenovo, the largest computer manufacturer in the world. So you got that on scholarship at grad school to be the first cohort from China to study in the USA as part of your grad studies. From there, you went to, you completed your studies, you got your first job at a little-known company working on peripherals, which gave birth to Mosaic, the first internet browser. Then moved over to Microsoft and was the first Asian employee. It was less than 20 people in the research lab. From there, you worked on browsers and the .NET operating system until you left in the year 2000 to start what would eventually become Elastos. From there, you were working on building an operating system for smartphones and IoT devices with Foxconn, a Windows operating system with Microsoft in China, and an automated car control system with SAIC, which is kind of like the equivalent of General Motors in the USA. And then fast forwarding a little bit further, 18 years, where you're now here, you're a professor at Tsinghua University, which is often described as the Harvard of China for engineering, and you're now building up this new Smartweb. So I know I've missed things, but as you all can see, it's a very rich history. But this resume that I've just written, or that I've spoken about, it wasn't always obvious that this was what your career was going to look like, was it? So what was your first job back in China?
Actually, by reading through the resume, actually it sounds actually everything is planned out. But actually, my life is consists of accidents after accidents. Most of the jobs actually it's not my choice. It's just happen. I don't have a choice. I just ended up there. That's what it is. It's just kind of a flukes in a row. I started when I was in second grade, actually, end of second grade at elementary school, the Cultural Revolution started. Basically, the school ended. I spent my third grade and fourth grade pretty much stayed at home and no parents. Very happy childhood because no parents and no school, right? But then, of course, if you read a little bit of history, that's turmoils in China. Then later on, when I graduated from high school, which I don't have a job. Actually, no one has a job. Everyone ended up on farms. So I turned out to be, the first job was a pig farmer for 2 years.
Amazing. And so what did you learn from those experiences growing up? Because it was a very different time to what it is now.
Yeah, as I said, when I was elementary school, fourth grade or fifth grade, actually the school resumed. But then it's only like 2 classes a day. But then somehow, when I went to middle school, still most part of the schooling was not really the regular school, right? If you read the history, was just really horrible. But then somehow I realized I excelled during those times because my parents was in deep trouble because they were intellectuals, they were sent to different cities. But somehow the one way to survive is I was pretty good at school, and some of the teachers really liked me and give me extra inspirations or education. So when I ended up as a pig farmer, somehow I kept the momentum going, even though we worked pretty hard. Actually, the kids started working on the farm when sun rises and going home when the sun sets. That's that somehow because there's no hope for college, there's no hope for going back to the city. We don't know where's the future, but somehow I managed to read 50 pages of book every day. I don't know why. And at that time, there were no books. You don't really plan on what you're going to read. Basically, you ended up whatever books you can get, you read 50 pages of that book, no matter whether you like the book or not, right? That's the only book you can get your hands on. And so some of the stories or content I was really not interested. But then I just sat out there, read 50 pages. I don't really know what the book's talking about. I read 50 pages. That's all that was. And then, lucky enough, less than 2 years, I was there, and then the college reopened after 10 years. College closed in China for 10 years. And when I was in the farm, the college reopened. So there are only 2 months to do the national exam. I was lucky enough to be ranked very top in the nation. So I got to the most privileged school of Tsinghua University.
Fantastic. And I'll fast forward a little bit to coming to university and finishing your grad schools. I remember talking to you about getting your first job. Could you tell us a little bit about how that whole experience? So, essentially, the troubles that you ran into when you were looking to get a job after having
in the United States.
In the US.
Yeah. Because at that time, I went to the United States January of '84 because it was a communist country. And 86 or 87, I was trying to find an internship because I was holding a Chinese passport. I got an internship from Bell Labs doing operating systems, but then I was turned down because they realized they could not hire an intern from China. I couldn't go. So I ended up I have to look for jobs and for the summer. And so I just look around campus and find out there's a National Center for Supercomputing Applications, which is a joint lab between University of Illinois and, of course, it's funded by DoD and DOE, Department of Energy and Department of Defense of the United States. But then it's just donation to the schools. It's not really, had nothing to do with military. So I look at the lab. The name sounds interesting, so I applied. I became one of the early grad programmers there. 4 years later, actually Mosaic was invented in the lab. I was after long gone, but we did some very early job because at that time we had supercomputers like Cray XM2, Cray 2 and Cray XMP, and collaborating with 5 universities like Princeton, University of California, San Diego, Cornell, CMU, 5 schools together connected with a satellite with supercomputers to set up our own internet. Of course, the scientists, we use PC Macintosh workstations to dial up to the 5 centers. They could dial to one of the 5. So it's very parallel to the internet. And so the scientists could retrieve data from the supercomputers, right, back and forth. We were doing, later on there's a company called SpyClass was born out of this venture. The reason why it's called specularized is because we have multiple windows doing visualization of the data, doing the animation, contouring, and pseudo color, and different kinds of ways to present scientific data, right? And of course, we did the early stage of PC versions of TCP/IP, because at that time PC doesn't have TCP/IP. So two grad students wrote the PC versions of TCP/IP and open source it, and me and another grad students, we wrote the visualization part, and together the TCP/IP will fetch data from the supercomputers, and the visualization will present them. So in a way, it looks like a spec glass, right? But then that's really the early prototype of the web.
Amazing. It's not often that we get to talk and hear from someone who's like in such early days of creating such pioneering technology. From there, your experience at Mosaic and what would eventually become Lenovo, you then joined Microsoft. You worked there for 10 years, is that correct? 8 years.
8 years.
Okay, and you were working on browsers to start off with, and then the .NET operating system. I'm sure you had like some great stories out of that, but why did you leave Microsoft?
Well, I joined Microsoft also again for one reason, for only reason was at that time I was a Chinese national because I couldn't work for Bell Labs, I couldn't work for IBM Dr. Heights, I couldn't work for Tektronix or Xerox PARC, which all the above were my dream jobs, but I couldn't get them because of the Paris Treaty, and they don't hire anyone from communist country. So I ended up working for Microsoft Lab, Microsoft Research, because during 1979, Microsoft didn't have a government contract, so they didn't sign the Paris treaties. They could hire people from communist country. So that's the only reason I joined Microsoft Research. And of course, when I joined Microsoft Research, I was doing operating systems. I read Mark kernel code, I read Unix code line by line, right? Like 200,000 lines of code. I read all of them. And so at that time, I knew operating system was relatively small, 200,000 lines. It's not that big, but it's big, but it's not that big. I will talk about that later. So of course, Microsoft Research, the first group of research was operating systems. I ended up there. Later on, I moved to the browser IE, and of course, naturally, I did ActiveX, if anyone knows what ActiveX is. I was part of the team member doing ActiveX. Then later on, turned into automation, turned into Complas, and turned into the .NET in 1998. So we were trying to do an operating system for the internet, because 1992, Sam Macro, the inventor of Java programming language, had a slogan called "The network is the computer." Was really, really early, 1992, right? People have the slogan, the network is the computer. So 98, we were trying to do an operating system for the network computer. What is a network? We were trying to do an operating system for the network computer. So here I will talk a little bit about why we want to do that. Until today, right, 20 years after 98, the operating system we're using today is called device OS. Device OS meaning the OS only take care of whatever happens on that machine. Anything goes off the machine, it's none of the operating system's business. Operating system only provides you something called a socket. Socket is more like a door. You can go in and out. If you go into the internet, you're going out of the socket, right? You're on your own. Basically, if you look at today, all internet activity is actually conducted by applications themselves. It's not by the operating systems. If you're going out of this door, you are cheated, you are robbed. Operating system is no one to be blamed, right? They have hands off saying, why don't you take care of your password? Why don't you take care of yourself? I mean, basically, we put too much on consumers or on developers, right? The network OS, on the other hand, 1998, we were thinking, can we letting the operating system send and receive all internet packets and prohibit applications from sending and receiving any internet packets directly. So in a way, applications are not going on to internet. The operating system going on to internet on applications' behalf. That's the difference between a device OS and a network OS. When we talk about you own your own data, and when we talk about the, I know a lot of people here for blockchains. What blockchain is blockchain issue tokens. And we don't want to go into details. And given the tokens, there's a double spending issue. If you have a token, then I can make a counterfeit of the token, then the token doesn't worth much, right? So you make a token and input a 5 BTC. That's a 5 Bitcoin token, right? So like token with 5 Bitcoins. So you can send it to me, or I can send it to you without worrying about double spending. So then it's basically cryptocurrency. But then the thing is, when we do you own your own data, do we have a double spending issue for your data? So if you own an ebook, which can somebody can do a counterfeit, then the ebook doesn't worth much. So how do we prevent the double spending issue for your data? And that's really another side of the coin to solve the smart economy for this so-called powered by blockchains, right? Because when we talk about I give you a token for what? You want in return a digital asset. So that's trade. You use the token to buy something. Currently, if you see Bitcoins, you use tokens to buy anything offline. Can you do tokens buying anything online, virtual? So then you need to solve the double spending, the data double spending issue. So that's where the operating systems somehow combine with the blockchain concept.
Interesting. So let me try and see whether I understood it correctly. So we think of first party, second party, and third party applications. So first party being me as a consumer, second party being the operating system which we use to get onto applications, and third party being all the applications that are on there. And what you were explaining was that there's a problem with the current technology stack today where third-party applications can take copies of your data. So I create a Word document, I have to do that through a third-party application which can be easily copied. I don't have the control to actually manage that file. And this is one of the things which Elastos, which we'll get to, offers security and complete sandbox environment, I guess, to let you as the first person owner own that data. Is that correct?
Yeah. Here there are two aspects of it. I just mentioned we need to make sure all the network packets going on and off the internet is controlled by the operating system. And the other aspect actually Raj is talking about is what is a third-party application and what's a DApp. If you look at the DApp, because when people talk about blockchains, and many people are referring Bitcoin being the first generation of blockchain, basically that solved the problem of double spending tokens. People are saying the second generation of blockchain is Ethereum, which has the smart contracts, so then you can issue different tokens, like ERC20 tokens and ERC 731 tokens. So then people can do crowdfunding to do their own ICOs, right? And also, Ethereum is talking about smart contracts being dApps. Here I give you a definition of Elastos. What's a dApp? dApp is an app that cannot be shut down by a third-party intermediary. So what's an app? App is something we use on iPhones and Android phones and PCs. So from a consumer's perspective, an app is something useful to a consumer that can click on it and use it. That's an app. When PC was invented in the early 80s, before PC actually was IBM mainframe and other supercomputers like Cray supercomputers. At that time, software and hardware were sold at the same time. There's no software business per se. Microsoft was the one actually came up with the software in selling Windows, selling operating systems, right? So clearly they have a definition, third-party applications. The first party is the consumer. Second party is the one buying Windows or buying the computer. The third party, of course, is the independent developers, so-called ISVs, independent software vendor. And the third party actually provides the media player to make PC an entertainment center, and the application, the Office, installed on PC to make it a workstation. And of course, you can install games to make it make the PC a game console. So then, actually, the computer is a general purpose. Basically, the device can do nothing without third-party applications. That said, third-party applications has really contributed to the internet or the software ecosystems. But again, as I mentioned, the third-party applications really generate and consumes consumer data. Say, if you want to write a novel, you're using Word. So the consumer, the author, used the Word to write the novel, and the doc file actually is produced and consumed by the Word software, right? And if you imagine, if you make a video and the media player plays it, the media player playing the video, can the video player make a counterfeit copy and give it to the vendor, a software developer, right? Because if you buy a lot of free software on Android, how do the company support themselves? People should always ask. Cheap may not be the best solution for you. Cheap, right? To you, it's free, but then somehow the developers need to get paid. So how do they get paid? More often than not, while they play your video, they read your contact address book and send it somewhere else. So the advertisers could directly harass you, right, or harass your friends. Because of the applications can open up your software, open up your GPS location, and send, because they can access internet directly, so they send your data without your acknowledgements. So, and also when the media player plays the video, supposedly they give you a cut of the advertisement. But then if you play it 1,000,000 times, or they play it 10,000 times, the difference actually is the pure profit for the media player, right? They could tell you a fake number because they played 1,000,000 times, but the media player tell you it's only played 10,000 times, so they can keep the profit. There are some media players do that, right? And not all of them, but there are. So that means the third-party applications, by and large, they could be the most evil on the internet. Because we're talking about how do we get rid of the intermediaries. Who are the most intermediaries? Who are the intermediaries? In my mind, intermediaries, the largest one being the third-party applications, right? All of them. So Ethereum is talking about. Because then we'll talk about how do we develop this dApp that cannot be shut up by a third-party intermediary. If, like say, Raj made some podcasts, want to reach millions of customers, he's the author of the podcast. If I'm the audience, either I pay or not pay, I'm the second party, right? And the third party being, say, YouTube or some other video websites. Because the last internet is really talk about client server, browser server. Actually, the server, the website has all the data and can do whatever they want. And the author of this podcast may or may not get a fair share of his work, his data. And that said, how do we solve this problem, right? Then we come back to a little deeper into computer science. Of course, people know 40 years ago we have a PC. Currently, a PC is as small as an iPhone, right? And this iPhone actually is more powerful than 40 years, the supercomputer of 40 years ago. That said, this is a computer. And then, can we imagine giving the network fast enough? We have cloud storage, we have OneDrive, we have a Dropbox affiliated, mounted on this phone. And we also could have many CPUs running in Amazon clouds, virtual machines running virtual machines, the Dockers and in Amazon clouds running Elastos virtual machines, right? Because the virtual machine takes care of all the sending and receiving network packets. So then the virtual machine, because I log into this phone with my DID, and the DID will find the cloud drive for me, and also when I launch a task, the task will launch on Amazon cloud, directly talking to my cloud drive, which literally built a personal cloud computer. So 40 years ago was a personal computer. Now we're talking about personal cloud computer. Personal cloud computer can literally launch instantly. And then we have more or less infinite storage for any individual and infinite computation power for one individual, as long as you pay for the number of virtual machines you are willing to launch. And that computer itself is more powerful than a lot of websites, right? You can literally do like AlphaGo and deep learning and anything that a website could do. And that said, he has a personal cloud computer, I have a personal cloud computer. And let's say YouTube. Can YouTube build this visualization yellow page, this all the links and doing GIFs, which is basically a panel of yellow page doing the references or advertisements for podcasts. So now we're going back to the PC era. Remember the PCs? On a PC, 40 years ago, we don't have a network. We install third-party applications, say WordPerfect, Lotus 123, right? And so you install software on a PC, then the PC turned into a game center, turned into a workstation, turned into a entertainment machine, right? So now if we have personal cloud computer, can we have the YouTube service installed in my personal cloud computer instead of running in a separate website of YouTube, correct? So we that's where the idea of software as a service invented 20 years ago. Software as a service, SaaS, was, I don't know, it's arguable. People saying this term came out from someone, professor in Texas. But when we were at Microsoft, I thought we invented the term SaaS. The team I was working for we discussed the meetings about what's the rental model, what's the software as a service 20 years back. So then come back to the reason why I left was at that time, Microsoft was trying to license Java. There were stories, controversies, right? In 1995, Microsoft licensed Java, and 1997, Microsoft did J++. Microsoft did its own customized versions of Java. It turned out to be fastest virtual machine for Java at that time. Actually, I did the marshalling, the Java calling native, which is called iDispatch, which is a pretty dirty solution I helped, and which made J++ the fastest, because when you call a class library, we did a trick. Basically, when you call a Java class, we basically assign into Windows and calling C and return, and automate that process, which is called iDispatch. Somehow it's a really quick and dirty solution that turned into a fastest virtual machine, which really soured the relationship between Microsoft and Java, because then they don't license Java, the logo to us, to Microsoft, so it's called J++. After that incident, Microsoft decided to invent their own programming language. Later on, they turned into C#. The reason why Microsoft has to control a language is for only one reason. Java programming language has something called metadata. If you compile Java, that compiles into something called a class. If you compile C, the C compiles into .object. So we know we're in a university here, and class and object so correspond to mathematics like set and element. So really there are two different levels of abstractions. If given the class information, given the metadata, actually that's the key to generate network packets on application's behalf. As I mentioned, that's really the key. So 20 years later, you see Go programming language, Swift programming language. They are all native languages built in metadata. But then back 20 years ago, C++ doesn't have metadata, so C++ could not generate and receive network packets automatically. So that's really a key differentiator. Microsoft realized that, and it decided to go bet on the farm, that's Steve Ballmer's words, and go full hard into C#. The difference that I have with Microsoft at that time was, as I mentioned, I did iDispatch marshalling between Java and Windows. I believe we could do a package C++. Instead of inventing a new language, we package C++ to add metadata capability into C++, so that we can send and receive network packets and make a network OS. I proposed that, and of course at that time Microsoft decided to go competing bet on the farm, right? Basically they don't want to go to the native approach, they want to go to the intermediate language approach. So they disbanded the team that I was with, that's a ComPlus team. I was with Base.com team, so I decided to quit because I want to do an operating system, as I said, with the native language with metadata built in. But the reason why I have to go this way is very obvious today. There are two fundamental flaws of Java, or C# for that matter, 20 years back, C#. The flaw number one is that because we know virtual machine can fend off viruses, right? The virtual machine, basically the third-party applications running inside a virtual machine, so then the applications within virtual machine, they could not steal your data because it's controlled the sandbox, by the virtual machine. But then since Java is an intermediate language, it's not comparable to the CPU speed, there are always excuses. Third-party developers want to squeeze out every CPU cycle possible. So then, for example, game engines, deep learning algorithms, multimedia codecs, device drivers. So when you do those kind of applications, you need to go from the third-party application and going through something called a JNI. Basically, it's a backdoor going to Linux. So when you have a backdoor on your virtual machine, and the backdoor is open to all developers, so literally that means why do you want to build a virtual machine in the first place? So when you build a virtual machine, the intention is to do the sandboxing, but you leave a backdoor as open as a truck can drive through, right? Basically, why do you want to build a virtual machine? And so that's the flaw number one in Java today. 20 years later, today. And the second fundamental flaw of Java is not end-to-end. Java was invented in 1992, 26 years ago. It was invented for set-top boxes, for interactivities at that time. And if you think about the why Java was, because of interactivity, right, there's a head end, which is the server. Then there's a set-top box. So at that time, the set-top box could be MIPS, could be Alpha, could be PowerPC, could be x86. So there's no way the websites could predict which CPU I'm using on my set-top box. So they stream the Java intermediate code to the set-top box and just in time compile into the native code of the set-top box CPU. That said, can we have a Java virtual machine running in Amazon Cloud and having a virtual machine, Java virtual machine running on my phone, and having, because it has metadata, can we have the Java virtual machine generate and receive network packets so that the applications could not steal consumer data, could not launch DDoS attacks from set-top box to the websites? Without this end-to-end taking over the network, we could not solve the current internet problems. But somehow, the Java inventors didn't emphasize or did not see that early, and later on Java was taken over by Oracle, and pretty much it's gone. Really, very, very sad, right? If you look at what's the Elastos actually is two things. One is a virtual machine, native virtual machine, which runs on Linux, could run on Windows, but then we don't let the applications running inside Elastos virtual machine to have any excuse to go down to the native hardware OS, so that Elastos virtual machine is agnostic to the local operating systems, because we don't like applications to see whether it's Linux underneath or whether it's Windows underneath. That way, there's no way for the applications, third-party applications, to inject viruses into the hardware, right? And also, we're trying to take care of the end-to-end network packaging, because the virtual machine running on your Android phone, running on your iPhone, and then the virtual machine running in Amazon clouds, and all the network traffic between Elastos virtual machines are generated. So, but of course, today I can say it really, really clearly. But 20 years ago, 18 years ago, when I left Microsoft, I had this hunch. I couldn't speculate or elaborate as clearly as today. I failed to convince Microsoft to do the native versions of .NET, so I left. But then, after the failure of Windows Vista, Microsoft realized the key actually is in native virtual machines instead of the intermediate language virtual machines. So if you look at Windows 10 today, Windows 10 is really mature already. So Windows 10 claiming several things. I think deserve to elaborate. One is they have Java in C#, Visual Basic, JavaScript, and C. You can develop Windows 10 applications in any of the programming languages. And then when the different software modules implemented with different languages, when they talk to one another, Microsoft no longer has JNI. Microsoft called it p-invoke. The p-invoke is pretty much gone. Without p-invoke, all languages talk to one another automatically, translate and delegates by the operating system without applications have to worry about. Microsoft called it universal apps, so that the app could run on phones, run on x86, running on ARM, running on different kind of CPUs, without developers has to be aware which platform you're running the software. It's called a universal app. And the other thing Microsoft mentioned is that if you look at Elastos, we did an animation, right? Elastos is a last OS, because Elastos means two things. One is elastic compute. Elastic compute meaning virtual machines everywhere. And also it implies last OS. The reason why it's a last OS is because it's a network OS. When it's a network OS, we cannot enforce the device drivers, because if you have a device driver of Windows 95 or you have a device driver of Windows 2000, I'm holding a phone. How do I interact with the device? I cannot force the peripheral to upgrade or downgrade. That's called ambient computing. For internet, we cannot predict with web services, right? Which versions of web services you are running. We cannot force you either way, upgrade or downgrade. So that said, really network OS is really incubating a organic ecosystem. Organic ecosystem meaning some devices live, some devices die every day, right? There's a natural process. Instead of one day, everyone has to die and upgrade. So that time is gone. When that time is gone, and then can we do a ecosystem that lasts forever? It's basically self-healing and growing. And then all the services are someone old dies and new one born. So they kind of like organically grow there. So that way, giving people an illusion this operating system will last forever. So that said, Microsoft decided to disband its Windows team March of 2018, which half years ago, which didn't really make a big news. The Windows team's gone, and Microsoft doesn't mean they don't do operating systems anymore. It just means no more Windows 11. So the kernel now pushed into devices, turned pushed into BIOS. So every time you buy a phone, you buy a PC, you buy a TV, you have the BIOS built in, so the kernel builds in. And then everything else is a virtual machine. So the virtual machine grows, right? So that's exactly what happened already. It's not by Elastos. It's the trend. It's today. It's not the future.
Thank you, Ron. For everybody, we've got a little video here which just gives a very brief explanation of what Elastos is. So Ron has touched on a lot of different aspects of how we've come to the computing environment that we've come to today. Now we'll show you what will come from this day forward.
The Internet, imagined as a decentralized network of free-flowing information. Reality, decades-old technology full of viruses, attacks, unverifiable identities, and monopolies. What if we could start over? Elastos is the new Internet. With 18 years of development, Elastos is the first completely secure and decentralized network operating system. Elastos offers an operating system that can be installed on any hardware in the world. giving unparalleled security to self-driving cars, AR/VR platforms, IoT devices, smartphones, and smart routers. The Elastos Runtime lightweight version can be installed onto your smartphone. This app allows decentralized applications to be built on an agnostic peer-to-peer platform. How does it all work? In the Elastos ecosystem, the blockchain assigns everything its own decentralized ID. All users, applications, and smart devices get one. The internet today uses TCP/IP protocol that leaves computers vulnerable to hackers, but not with Elastos. On Elastos, all requests must go through the fortress-like Elastos runtime. Only blockchain-trusted IDs pass through, and unverifiable requests are discarded, keeping the ecosystem safe. Once inside, applications run on the Elastos carrier. The current internet uses third-party platforms to own and share your data, preventing real privacy. Elastos uses a peer-to-peer platform without third-party control. Applications built on this platform allow users to interact directly to buy, sell, and own digital assets. Unlike congested blockchain projects, Elastos dApps utilize sidechains to provide their own chain and near-infinite scalability. Sidechains can have their own tokens, smart contracts, and integration into Elastos. Elastos is the infrastructure for the new internet, providing a decentralized platform for apps, data ownership, a virtual economy, scalability, and ultimate security. New applications can be built on it, current applications can integrate with it, and other blockchain projects can join it. Elastos. Own your internet.
So I imagine many of you here are blockchain enthusiasts, and we talk a lot about blockchain being a new technology that's going to be revolutionary. There are a lot of claims on it. But we know at the moment they're limited in terms of speed, security, interoperability being the main things that people talk about. As a computer science professor, in your opinion, why do we need an operating system in order to build a new internet?
We look at the things from two directions. One is because I was from the operating system internet background. Naturally, I started building this, as I said, the native version. You can think of it as a native versions of Java VM. So we actually translated, we built a native C++ versions of Android phone. We took Android open source and we translated all their Java class library, core it, into C++. So if you call Java class, we have a counterpart in C++. If you call, of course, Android also has a Java framework. We translate that into C++ as well. As I mentioned, for only two reasons. One is we don't let the developer to see Linux, and we handle things end to end. That was the intention to build a Elastos phone and Elastos router back 2012 when Foxconn decided to invest into this project. So that's basically trying to solve, today that could be used to solve the data double spending problem. But then at that time, we were building a so-called enterprise OS or smart home OS. If you look at the smart homes, right, today, you see there's a Google Home, there's an Amazon, there's a Apple HomeKit, of course there's Alibaba, there's a Huawei, right, smart home solutions. But then, since you have so many gadgets at home, they each actually have a channel, have a network going into your homes. Can they collaborate on an open source, neutral, and autonomous running smart home network? So then, you can imagine you get your IDs from the blockchain, which is not controlled by any company. And also you get your public key, private keys from the blockchain, so you can send your message send and receive your message automatically from your home without worrying someone in the middle eardropping your smart speaker or watching, peeking into your home surveillance camera, right? So that basically built the autonomous running smart home network and powered by blockchain to make it autonomous running and neutral and open source. So that's one perspective from the operating system point of view to look at the smart home, look at the blockchain. The other one is actually from the blockchain world and see what's a DApp. I just mentioned one definition of DApp is app that cannot be shut down by third-party intermediaries. And then we really look into what's a blockchain. Again, as I mentioned, my background is really computer science, and there's something called a Turing test. Turing test actually was really early because I don't want people to have the illusion every time people mention about Turing. Alan Turing means something so mysterious because people brag about Turing complete very often in the blockchain world. I think they're exaggerating because Turing has died many years ago. And when Turing was alive, computer was really primitive. So Turing actually is about principles, about guidelines. It's not about speed because Turing machine is infinitely fast. The paper tape is infinitely long, so it means you have infinite storage. And also they have so-called finite automata. So basically the control unit is infinitely fast and never makes mistakes. So the three claims, infinite storage, infinite fast, and never makes mistakes. In the real world, there's no such computer, but that's ideally, right? We got more memory, we got faster speed, and we're less bugs. So we're moving towards that direction, which we will never achieve. That's what Turing is. Turing test, when we talk about artificial intelligence, Turing test meaning we have two dark rooms, and one room has a computer in it, the other room has a human in it. So there's a little window, you hand in a question, and then each of the being in the dark room answers the question. And if the human judge could not tell the difference between one another, so they're saying, okay, this computer is of 5-year-old intelligence. That's what Turing test is. So we borrow this experiment, we borrow the two dark rooms, we put a blockchain into one room, we put a computer, normal computer, regular computer in another room. Can we tell the difference between the two, right? So that's my experiment. And so if you ask the two rooms, give me an ID, right? Give me an ID. So I let's say I'm issuing, let's say we build a separate public. A separate public has, let's say, 100,000 citizens. So I just ask each room to give me 100,000 ID numbers, right? And then so I'll issue one ID to one of the citizens of the separate public. That said, could that conventional computer do it? Could the blockchain do it, right? The answer is yes. But then in time, people may realize, okay, this computer, some government behind it can revoke AID. But then it's less likely to happen on the blockchain. So that means we have more trust in this decentralized ID. And secondly, let's say if I did a podcast, I do a SHA-256, there's a 20, basically it's a hash number, right? So I'll ask each of the dark rooms, say, keep it for me just in case I have an argument with someone else to prove I'm the original author of this artwork, this podcast. So of course each of them will take that ID and archive it in case I need it, right? Again, what I find out, this blockchain is more trustworthy than that single computer. So basically what I'm saying is two dark rooms are providing equivalent services with different trust level, right? And the third question I will ask to documents are, since we're building autonomous driving vehicles, or we're building limited number of podcasts, so that I can make more money. Say this manufacturer want to make 10,000 autonomous driving vehicles. Literally, they require the stickers from the government, the Commerce Bureau, to stick on their vehicle to make sure this vehicle is can drive on the market, on the street, right? Similarly, I ask 10,000 tokens to combine with the podcast to build them together. I call it digital capsule. So I'll put a sticker into my digital capsule. So then I have 10,000 copies of digital capsules in circulation on the internet, no more, no less, which people are saying this is a scarcity of merchandise, so they can sell it for more because there are only 10,000 podcasts. If people do the double spending, if people do counterfeit of the digital capsule, then it's not worth much. Of course, the two documents can perform such services just as well as each other, but then one with more trust. Then the fourth test I want to do is accounting. So if you want to keep track of a logging, if I want to do some like e-commerce or doing trades like Alibaba Pay, Apple Pay, or instant transaction, that I want to pay $1 for a drink, right? Then I ask the two documents to do the services for me. I realized the computer can keep up, the blockchain could not keep up. So then I'm not going to use the blockchain room for my day-to-day lending services, right? Maybe they could do it, but then it's not good for it, so I'm not going to use it. But then we look at inside the document. Of course, the SUP's conventional computer is sponsored by some organization, say Google, or some government, issuing Commerce Bureau, issuing the stickers. The other one, of course, is managed by like 10,000 node Bitcoin miners, right? The millions of mining machines and so many miners, mining pools behind. They need to be rewarded inside their room, right? As for how they're going to reward, how they need to pay for the services, that's their business. That's none of my business to use their service. So if we look at Bitcoins that way, Bitcoin, the blockchains are actually consist of providing services. They're providing some services, but then really accounting the ledger is not one of the services I'm considering. They could do it, but Elastos won't use it because it's too slow. Then the thing is, when they provide me the Census Bureau service, but I consider the Bitcoin, the blockchain provides Census Bureau service, provide the National Archive or Notary Public service, provide the Bureau of Commerce service, right? And if I use that document for Census Bureau service, of course, on the internet, say the internet has 5 computers. Let's just say internet, as I mentioned in 1987, right? When we built supercomputers of a network, literally that consists of 5 computers, right? San Diego and Princeton, Illinois, and Cornell and CMU, 5 schools and connected through satellites. So if 5 schools, and who is the bigger brother, can they trust each other, right? Let's say Illinois doesn't trust Princeton, and Princeton doesn't trust CMU. And so the big brothers don't trust each other, but then they trust their own created computers. They trust their own computers, right? I trust my own SQL database. Or if I don't trust Oracle, I'm going to use MySQL. If I don't trust my SQL, I use NoSQL, right? So I trust my own software, I trust my own computer, but I don't trust your computer and your service. So I'm going to use the 5 computers, and if this one issue IDs and this guy does not trust, So then we come up to a consensus. Can we get IDs from that dark room of blockchains, right? So how fast could we fetch the IDs? No matter how slow is the Census Bureau, we could fetch the IDs in a day or in a week. And after we fetch the ID in a week, we cache it here. Every time we retrieve ID, we just really write local, right? Read and write local. We don't really go back to the blockchain and write. So that's a very typical algorithm for caching. And so ID service is not speed, is not an issue because we don't really write every time into the blockchain. Of course, for the National Archive or Notary Public, can we, how many times we have an argument we want to trace who is the original author of this podcast, right? How often do we use Notary Public? Is that really a speed issue? Then we use the blockchain, right? In case we're going to fetch, we're going to compare our hash with the blockchain hash. So I don't think for the Census Bureau, for the National Archive, I don't think there's a speed issue because you can archive one document. You can archive the hash of a truckload of documents, right? And you can archive a year worth of documents, put them in one hash, and then register. So is that really a speed issue? If I ask 10,000 copies of stickers, the same principle applies. So when people say we want to make the blockchain faster, this is ambivalent. First of all, we need 10,000 nodes to build trust. The reason why we build trust is so we check and balance each other, right? So that means, let's say 10,000 nodes, we don't trust each other and we all keep a full copy of the ledger. Comparing to a one conventional computer, that one guy doing that ledger, which one is faster? The answer is very obvious that single computer is faster than 10,000 computers doing the blockchain. Then we're saying, oh, how come your 10,000 computers is not fast enough comparable to that one computer? Then do we know what question we're asking? Basically, that's a false question. It shouldn't be asked in the first place, right? The blockchain is really not for TPS. So that said, we have 5 supercomputer centers and 5 supercomputers super fast. Why do we ask the blockchain for speed? That's completely absurd.
Yeah, I totally get you. So coming to summarize, I guess, what Elastos is and why we feel it's important. Firstly, it's the first of its kind. It's an operating system which provides an open environment for anyone to contribute to and be a part of. It's fair to everyone, regardless of where you come from. There's no Chinese internet, there's no Western internet, there is just a global internet operating system. You can contribute it doesn't matter whether your skin color is black or white or female or male. Because everyone has an ID which is issued from a blockchain, you don't need to necessarily know who that person is. All you need to know is that they can contribute and solve the problem which has been asked, or the code solution that needs to be completed. Another thing, obviously, is that it's versatile. You can put this on a computer, you can put this on a phone, you can put this on a router, so it can literally go anywhere, and it's anonymous and net neutral, which is a real issue today, and not just in Australia, but also other parts of the world. It's decentralized and it's resilient. So one of the features of this with adding blockchain to an operating system is that with SHA-256, we now have the capability with merge mining with Elastos to have potentially the highest hash power of every blockchain. So one of the partners that you have is with Bitmain. And with that, you can use both Bitcoin Cash as well as Bitcoin Core, I guess, hash powers and the miners to mine this Ella token, which operates in, provides that security layer for this Elastos operating system. So I'm keen to have people, I know people will be interested in asking questions. I'm going to ask one last question, and then I'll open it up to the floor. There's a microphone in the middle, so please get your questions formulated, and you'll get your chance to ask from any question that you like. So one of the things which interests me about, or is often a challenge for why you would move from the existing operating systems to this new operating system. One part is security, obviously, but a lot of other people would say, well, I get enough security, I don't trust my Facebooks and my Googles, and they offer me stuff for free. But in this new system, with a new operating environment, one of the examples which you gave, which really captured my attention, was the idea of having a phone, for instance. You have your phone there on the table, and if you put your fingerprint on it, your operating system opens up. And then if you gave me that same device and I put my fingerprint on it, my operating system would come up. And you could apply that to any device. So whether it's a TV, whether it's a smartphone, whether it's a computer. Now that to me was groundbreaking. That was something that, in terms of a UX experience, a user experience, that's something that you can't do on current machines. So we're moving to a world where devices no longer matter, right? You own your data and it's available to you at any point in time. What are some other interesting use cases in this new world of Elastos that you can't do in the existing world?
Yeah, because over a beer party in Chiang Mai, we talked about this scenario because we were in Chiang Mai, which is Thailand, right? The folks there believe in Buddhism because there are lots of Buddhism temples. There we talk about reincarnations, right? Because a lot of people believe in reincarnations. So, as I mentioned, Turing is about the limits. If we have infinite computation power, if we have infinite storage, if we have infinite speed of communication, what kind of scenarios can you imagine, right? Because we're going 4G to 5G wireless, we're going from 10 megabits Ethernet into gigabit in and out of homes, fiber optics. So we see the speed of communication. But then some principal guidelines we have to be really crystal clear. The first principle I want to mention is computation is orthogonal to communication. That principle is not invented by me. I learned it at Microsoft when we designed .NET. So that means when you write your programs, when you write a Turing equivalent programs, which is any programs to solve your day-to-day problems, you don't really need to be aware of communication. Currently, applications take care of the internet networking. That's a huge, huge mistake. We made honest mistake, human-made for the past, since 70s, 40, 50 years now. Can we write any program without, it's agnostic, without knowing which communication protocols we're using? So that's really number one. The second one is, we used to be bound or constrained, confined in this hardware body. And since if we have a cloud drive, if we have a cloud computer in Amazon, can we have this phone being enabling device? Here, I use my finger and facial recognition. This is a window suck me into the cyber pocket, right? I'm actually into a second life, a virtual cyber world. Through this window, I'm stuck in. Imagine that. And with my finger, that's an ID. I enter a new world, like, what do you think? Star Trek, beamed into a different eternity. And that said, if I lost the phone, I get another phone, I find my fingerprint, or overnight, all my data recached into my machine, and I can, enter the world. So the phone no longer belongs to one person. As I said, the kernel will be built into BIOS, and the virtual machine will be downloaded on demand. So then anybody put their finger on this device, right? Because the kernel is in BIOS, and the virtual machine is downloaded. If the network is fast enough, the virtual machines, it is downloaded instantly. Then basically, what's a computer? The computer is no longer be one person. Anybody with a finger, with a facial recognition can enter this new world. So this is more like a train station as we can enter, right? So then, if you lost the phone, it's like this body is too old and deserves to die, and there's a new one, and your finger, you're entering again. So in Chiang Mai over here, we're talking about that's really the reincarnations, right? Your spirits live on forever, but your body will just like keep on evolving. So that was the metaphor we were talking about.
Awesome. All right, so firstly, thank you, Ron. Please join me in. I think we've got 15 to 20 minutes for Q&A. So I'm sure you guys have got some good burning questions for Ron. There's a lot we didn't cover today, but I'm sure you guys have some questions for him. So please feel free to come down to the middle and ask any questions that you got.
I just have a quick question. What do you think are the primary barriers to adoption? What do you think the main challenges are for adoption for us?
Yeah, we are actually pushing two things. First of all, we're setting up this separate public, this open source and neutral and autonomous running society, and we're also just wrote a draft of the first constitution. So we'll set up the Republic councils. So the councils will vote and kick in the First Amendment, Second Amendments. So we'll have this a society run by themselves. It's a kind of autonomous running society of the virtual world. Of course, there's a lot of technical blocks, and if you imagine, wouldn't that be too overwhelming a task? But on the other hand, as I mentioned, we've been through like the Lenovo days when Lenovo had the Lenovo lab has had only 5 people. We went to the University of Illinois NCSA lab when the lab has only like 5 grad students and doing software. And who could imagine the world could be impacted today? Of course, everybody's a human being and everyone has some shortcomings. But then, if you remember the early days of web, you need a URL, you get the web pages. As long as people perhaps this metaphor or start to adopting the idea, it's really beyond landscape, it's beyond any corporation, right? The whole web will push themselves going. So we hope to be the ones just get this snowball rolling, and then everything else is up to the society. It's definitely beyond one person, beyond one organization. So the core team, the Elastos Foundation, actually we gave half of the tokens to the cyber public. We gave the inflation, the rewards for developers to the cyber public. The foundation only keeps 10% of the total tokens, which is about 3 million. And also, of course, the Bitcoins were raised. And that said, we only have limited resources, right? Because we don't expect ourselves to solicit for donations. We just use up all the tokens we have. Of course, foundation has 1/10, and the other 40% goes to the angel investors, private founders, and public founders. Basically, they're in circulation today, right? right? More or less. So 10% going to the foundation, 40% to the fundraisers, and 50% goes to the separate public. That said, we plan to use up the 10% for the core team, for the foundation, in 3 to 5 years. Then the foundation is gone. No one, no organization, no individual controls the separate public, right? So then we can have society self-propelling and rolling on its own. If we fail this part, then we'll fail. But on the other hand, look at the retrospect, we see what the web has brought us, right? We really, we are excited and very optimistic about this.
Well, thank you very much for this amazing talk. I feel like Ready Player One already. My question is, might be a little bit silly, but how about the transition between the current internet with all the information that we already have to the Elastos system? Does the Elastos system itself provide access to the conventional internet? Will you ask each one to make the migration on their own and put it, or do you need a third-party application to be the gate between the current and the new internet?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, the current internet actually is decentralized, right? The internet, I think the founding fathers of the internet made a really, really wise decision to make the internet decentralized, packet switching. Even at that time, we have 2 different kinds of networks. One is packet switching, the other one is a virtual circuit. So now we are building the virtual circuit, peer-to-peer virtual circuit, on top of this conventional internet. So we're not saying one has to replace, but the Elastos peer-to-peer network actually sits on top of the current internet. So the current internet is still there, but then we're building another layer on top of the internet, right? So this separate public internet has decentralized IDs. So people use their phone to log in like Chrome, but then you can also use Elastos browser. The Elastos browser actually is adopted from Chrome. So we took Chrome source code. First thing we did was we cut off the HTTP. We don't let the applications directly use HTTP. Other than that, everything else is the same. So we replaced it with the peer-to-peer network, decentralized peer-to-peer network. We call it decentralized carrier. And that's the first thing we did. The second thing we did, of course, we put wallet in. So you can get IDs, you can trade tokens. And we build virtual machines, and then so we can trade digital assets with your tokens, right? So that's the Elastos browsers we're building. People have a choice. You can still use the old internet or use the new internet. The new internet with this kind of, we have 3 kinds of apps, over 3 kinds of Elastos apps. The number 1 kind, as I said, is pretty much only you don't see HTTP. If you don't see HTTP, you still have a website, you still have the big data, right? You still keep other people's data in your website. We support that. We're not really, we let people to choose. So that means adapting the conventional client-server model to this Smartweb client-server model is really, really easy. You just don't have to access. You just don't access HTTP at all. That's all. And everything else is the same. The second kind of Elastos app is, we call it peer-to-peer compute, peer-to-peer app. As I mentioned, we built a phone, a personal cloud computer. So your personal cloud computer can be really, really powerful, right? With multiple virtual CPUs running in Amazon clouds, and you have a cloud drive, Dropbox or somewhere, right? And so then we can do chats, we can do trades. You have a shop and buying from your shop without intermediaries. But then if you want to do, let's say, supply chain logistics, or hey, I pay you money, because there are some products I pay you money in digital assets. The autonomous swap is done by the operating system, right? If anything more sophisticated, then we support smart contracts, right? Smart contracts and, as I said, the YouTube kind of web services running the virtual machine on this decentralized carrier randomly pop up in some clouds and doing the arbitration between us. Because we both sign off for this machine algorithm, so that algorithm launches on our behalf. But then you cannot take money directly by yourself. I cannot take money. So we have to follow the algorithms to decide on who's receiving what, right? So then that's the third kind of Elastos apps. Of course, currently we're going to support the first kind first, then second kind, second and third kind, we should be able to support smart contracts by the end of the year. So we're going to run Ethereum EVM, we're going to run Neo EVM, VM by the end of this year when we have a beta release. By that time, we hope to have 1 million set-top boxes running, and with the IPFS running, IPFS being the public storage for the cloud computer, and the set-top box could be your personal cloud drive with the NAS connected to it, or connect to the Dropbox, right? And we hope by the end of the year we'll have 1 million smart speakers installed, and we'll have 1 million DID users. So 3 million, right? 1 million DID users, 1 million set-top boxes, and 1 million smart speakers. It's, again, I know people taking video. It's not the Elastos Foundation. I don't take any blame if we reach the numbers. And actually, those are public information. The box is by Visionary, Shanghai Corporation, and the smart speakers by LEX, a Taiwanese company, and the 1 million DID is by ViewChain. So basically, our partners claiming the 3 millions in public right now. I'm just giving out the information.
Another way to answer that as well is that the actual development can, if you look in your beginner's guides, there's a slide in there that talks about building on Elastos. You can do that in any programming language, and you build it once and it'll run on any operating system. So in terms of moving from one ecosystem to the next, it should be very quick. The potential is that it will go very quickly.
First of all, thank you, Ron. Love the reincarnation metaphor around our data. I think that's super cool. Interested in the namespace challenge around all the IDs and the digital assets. How do you imagine, and I guess reincarnation applies to this, just like domain names have a yearly renewal, what's the model for IDs, the life of an ID and the fees around that, and the IDs around digital assets and the fees around those?
I don't think I understand what you're saying.
If you're naming assets on the network, how much does that cost? Is that a yearly fee? Is that a one-off fee?
No, actually, Elastos is completely free. It's open source and free to everyone. And then there's no gas per se, but then there are very much like Bitcoin. We do have transaction fees, which is right now very small nominal price that I pay for the logging of a transaction. That said, we do have support. We do have intend to support multiple sidechains in the user space on the internet. So we have two different kinds of sidechains. One is the system sidechains, for example, ID sidechains, digital asset sidechains. But then we also support user level sidechains, let's say Ethereum smart contracts and Neo smart contracts. So those are, I call them user level sidechains. Of course, one sidechain could be for the custom service. One is for supply chain service, and whoever governing that sidechain may decide to charge the gas fee for more transaction fees. That's up to the third-party service providers, right? And secondly, when the whole business model is that it's like Google, and we want the search to be free. We want the internet to be free. But then that doesn't mean everything is free. Because as I said, if your podcast want to be ranked higher, we are going to work with partners to do you own your own data. You own your own data, put your own data podcast into your own personal cloud computer, right? If you put your own data into your personal cloud computer, do you know how to advertise? Do you know how to market? And people are saying, YouTube exploited us. But then they did a lot of work, right? So they do marketing, they do advertisement, right? They find out. And if we own our own data, then we have to have a decentralized marketing engine working on your behalf. You may have a choice. You may use number A as your marketer, or you may use number B as your marketer. But then I expect some of them you have to pay for the premium service, right? Because that's up to the service providers to charge you. And then you pay ELA to the advertiser. Advertisers will push the podcast on your behalf. So one thing is, so long as you have choices, meaning there are different kinds of services competing with one another. So that's the platform we want to be. We want to be transparent. So that you own your own data, you have a choice to pick the yellow page service provider. And then we are actually have partners building this decentralized marketing engine right now. We have a team working with us to build this IPFS right now, right? To do this caching so that you can watch video, 4K video out of your set-top box. We have a service provider working with us right now. And we intend to have like a decentralized search engine, decentralized e-commerce in each marketplace. So all those services depends on who's providing the charge.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I think in answer to your question as well, I think another layer to that is, so let's just say I wanted to find you, right? I'm sorry, I don't know your name, but Grant. So how would I find Grant? Do I type in this 12-digit number and then I find Grant? Or do I do grant.email and then I find Grant? Right? Is that basically the question? Yeah. So I'm not sure of the answer to that one, like how much that will cost. I think it will cost something, but I think it's still being worked out.
Well, Elastos also intend to provide everyone a free service. It's pretty much like if you look at Windows, you got a mediocre media player, so you can play some music. But if you want a premium service, you have a choice. So we do intend to have, let's see, if you want to do video conferencing from me to my wife in Seattle, so that'll be free. But if you want to reach a million audience through video, then you have to buy benefit.
Hello, Rong. Thanks for coming here and for informing us of what you're doing. Also, congratulations on that first 100,000 TV boxes that have gone out.
Yeah.
With the IOX and the V-chain, I wasn't aware. Are they be supporting the Elastos carrier network, or will they be supporting their own side chains as a part of that?
Currently, here I give people, some people may not follow what he's saying. We have our partners working with set-top boxes because they have millions of set-top boxes all over the world, mostly in China or Southeast Asia, and some of them are in the US or in everywhere, right? Because they watch Chinese content. All those set-top boxes have something called OTA, so over the air they can upgrade. And actually we haven't sold that many, but then our partner claim they have more than 100,000 set-top boxes has been through the OTA has updated, right? So the smart speaker from IOEX is the same thing. Currently, they are providing services to Europe and North American market. That's a Amazon compatible smart speaker, so you can say hello Amazon, hello Alexa, and the speaker will answer the question, right? Smart speaker. So the main business actually keep intact, but we do have the carrier software installed. So then we can slowly to add functionalities without interfering with the main core business. So kind of side by side, right? So if you're adventurously turned on, and you may have peer-to-peer versions of some videos instead of the conventional like a WeChat, Tencent video or iQIYI video in China. Well, those are the two major websites like Netflix of the US in China. That slowly we're deploying this so-called decentralized carrier out right now.
Another question with Cyber Republic. I believe it's a very, very good idea, and I think with 100 suggested apps to be funded, hopefully, as part of the Cyber Republic, I feel it's a bit of a coup, as within the blockchain space, there's a very big shortage of developers and code writers. In amongst that, I think in some ways this might give Elastos a bit more of an advantage of other people trying to develop their own dApps. And also, instead of, say, building something that you might call a shitcoin or that on Ethereum, there's going to be more reality if the dApps have been developed on Elastos as a proper use case.
If you see the proportion, we reserved 10% of the tokens for the core team, which builds the carrier, builds the virtual machine, builds the blockchain. Actually, Elastos consists of 4 pillars. The 4 pillars are, of course, our main chain, merge mining chain, the set chain, smart contract set chains, and the second pillar is the carrier. The reason why I named it the carrier, again, is from this virtual circuit idea, because AT&T is a carrier, China Mobile is a carrier, and carrier, again, China Mobile, AT&T, they're centralized carriers. Can we have a peer-to-peer decentralized carrier? Because who is giving us IDs for phones, right? It's the carriers. And then we want to emphasize on peer-to-peer computing. You got a phone, I got a phone. We are peer-to-peer. But then who's to say I cannot replace my phone with a supercomputer? We're still peer-to-peer, right? And that basically we want to move away from this client-server model. We want to move to the serverless model. So that's why we have to emphasize something called decentralized carrier network as a computer. Of course, the third one being the personal cloud computers, right? I replace my phone with a virtual computer. The fourth one being, the first one being different decentralized services, marketing, decentralized exchanges, decentralized marketplace, decentralized search engines, right, and software SDKs. So that all the above is really what the core team, the foundation, is sponsoring. But that sounds so big a project already. But imagine it's much harder. It's much easier actually to do this operating system than to incubate an ecosystem. Why people want to use your system? If no one uses your operating system, then the operating system worth nothing, right? Like Android, like Windows, like Linux, it's the same thing. Actually, building, say Windows, Microsoft only had at that time 10,000 employees when I joined. Later on, we had maybe 100,000 employees today, 20 years later, 30 years later, right? But then, even that said, definitely there are at least 10 times more developers working on the Windows ecosystem. Now it's more working on the Apple ecosystem, working on Android ecosystems, right? With that understanding, that's why we allocate more than half of the tokens to the Cyber Republic. We set up a project called CR100. So we have 100 slots, basically inviting people to apply, and we are going to allocate $100,000 worth, either tokens or US dollars, fiat money, to invest into the startup. So we claim for, the Czech Republic, they claim for 5% of the equity, right? So we want to make the numbers as clear as possible, and we want to who is applying, and milestones, the checking process, the GitHubs. We want everything to be transparent, to be traceable. So that's kind of new business model there, right? If you're willing to join, and because and also we're hiring, we're doing the something called Empower 35, because Faye is our chief marketing officer, and she is actually a Cyber Republic council, interim council, and that idea actually is from her. And so Empowering 35 meaning she'll hire, basically the council will hire 35 experts from different areas, marketers, traders, and software developers, in different areas. Even that said, 35 experts, do we have enough expertise? There's no way we know everything on the internet. So then that's why we're not here for money. That's why we're saying, okay, 100,000 for 5% of your equity. Don't argue, right? Because we are not investors, we're not VCs. They don't say, oh, my project worth 100 million. I don't argue that. So everything is transparent, and you put on the code. Maybe somebody get a better deal, some people may not get a fair share, but then it's for the public to judge. That's the model we're building. So we're really trying to build a clear, transparent, autonomous running society there. And by the way, I'm only a citizen, I'm not a council, and I have to listen to the big boss. Together, who is our big boss? We always voted the blockchain robot be the president.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for your question as well. I think we're going to have to wrap up here. Please help me thank Rong for his talk today and his Q&A as well.